Her own father sold her like cattle to a savage Viking warrior to save his lands. But when that man touched her for the first time, what happened next horrified her family and shocked two entire worlds. The announcement. The August sun fell mercilessly on Ravenswood Manor when Elena turned 18 years old. But instead of celebrations, that day brought the announcement that would change her destiny forever. Lord William Ravenswood, a man of 55 years whose weathered face spoke of decades fighting against Vikings who constantly attacked his lands, had made the most difficult decision of his life. The manor stretched across thousands of acres in Northumbria, England, in the year 1066 AD. It was one of the region's most prosperous estates, with cattle grazing in golden meadows and crops feeding 3 nearby villages. But that prosperity had a price: the constant attacks from Viking warriors who claimed those lands as theirs from ancestral times. Elena was Lord William's only daughter, born after 4 sons who had already proven their worth defending the family property. But she, with her chestnut hair that shone like honey under the sun and eyes green as emeralds, had grown up protected within the stone walls of the main house, oblivious to the brutal realities her brothers faced every day in the fields. "A beautiful woman, but useless for the times we live in," Lord William had muttered that morning, watching his daughter from his study window as she fed doves in the central courtyard. His words were harsh, but his heart broke pronouncing them. Elena had grown sweet and obedient, with a smile that could illuminate the darkest days. But in a world where survival depended on strength and cunning, her gentleness seemed more weakness than virtue. The proposition. Captain Thornton had arrived that same afternoon with a proposal sounding more like ultimatum than negotiation. Viking attacks had intensified in recent months, and the king's army couldn't guarantee protection for all the region's estates. But there was an opportunity to establish a temporary truce, an agreement that could save lives on both sides. "Lord Ravenswood," the captain had said while pouring himself ale in the study where destinies were decided, "we have a special Viking prisoner. He's not a common warrior. This is Bjorn, nephew of Chief Harold, one of the most respected leaders of his people. We captured him wounded after the last attack, but instead of executing him, we want to use him to negotiate." The plan was simple in its cruelty: deliver Elena to the Viking warrior as a show of respect and trust, thus sealing an alliance that would protect the region from future attacks. It was an ancient practice used by many cultures to unite enemy territories through forced marriage. But for Lord William, it meant delivering his only daughter to a world he considered savage and dangerous. "My daughter is not merchandise to trade," he'd initially roared, his fist striking the solid oak table that had belonged to his grandfather. But Captain Thornton knew well the weak points of desperate men. "Your other 4 sons are of age to marry and form their own families," he'd continued with calculated coldness. "If the attacks continue, there'll be no manor to inherit, no living sons to perpetuate the Ravenswood name. One daughter sacrificed can save an entire generation." The words had struck deep in the Lord's heart. The conversation. During the following hours, Lord William paced his study like a caged animal, struggling between paternal love and the responsibility of protecting his complete family. He'd seen too many manors turn to ash, too many families destroyed by war that seemed endless. When he finally called Elena to his presence, the sun was setting, painting the sky with colors seeming to anticipate the drama about to unfold. The young woman entered the study with natural grace inherited from her mother, Lady Margaret, without imagining that in the next minutes her world would completely crumble. "My daughter," Lord William began, avoiding looking directly at her eyes, "I've made a decision that will save this family and everyone who depends on us. Tomorrow, you'll depart toward Viking territory, where you'll live as wife to one of their warriors." The words fell on Elena like lightning, destroying a tree in full storm. For several seconds, she believed she'd heard wrong. Her mind couldn't process the magnitude of what her father had just announced. "Father," she murmured with trembling voice, "are you serious?" "Completely serious," he responded. And for the first time in her life, Elena saw tears forming in the eyes of the man she'd always considered stronger than the mountains surrounding their home. "It's the only way to protect everything we've built. Your sacrifice will save your brothers' lives, your mother's, all the workers of this estate." The word sacrifice resonated in Elena's soul like a funeral bell. In that moment, she understood that to her family, she had never really been a beloved daughter, but a piece on the great chessboard that was survival on the frontier. Lady Margaret, who had been listening from the hallway, rushed in with face bathed in tears. Her daughter was the center of her world, the light illuminating her days as a mother in a place where joy was a luxury they could rarely afford. "William, you cannot do this," she begged, embracing Elena as if she could protect her from the decisions of the masculine world surrounding them. "She's our girl, our only daughter. Vikings are savages. We don't know what they'll do to her." But Lord William had hardened his heart to make the most difficult decision of his life. "It's decided, Margaret. The captain will leave with her at dawn. Bjorn is waiting in the military camp, and from there they'll take her to Viking territory." The last night, that night, was the longest in Elena's life. She remained awake in her room, looking at the wooden beams of the ceiling she'd contemplated since childhood, knowing it was the last time she'd sleep under the roof that had protected her for 18 years. Her most precious belongings fit in a small leather trunk. The Bible her grandmother had given her, some family jewels, and the white dress her mother had embroidered for her wedding day, a day that would now arrive in the most unexpected manner. At dawn, when the first sun rays painted the stone walls golden, Elena said goodbye to the only life she'd known. Her brothers embraced her with masculine awkwardness, not knowing what words could alleviate the pain of separation. Her mother cried until she had no more tears, whispering prayers in her ear and promising she'd always be in her heart. The first meeting. The journey to the military camp lasted 2 days through landscapes growing more barren and wild with each mile traveled. Elena traveled in silence, observing how the civilization she knew gradually vanished, replaced by rocky mountains and wilderness seeming to extend to infinity. When they finally arrived at the camp, Captain Thornton led her toward a tent where waited the man who would change her destiny forever. Bjorn stood with hands bound behind his back, but his presence filled all available space. He was a man of 26 years, tall and strong, with skin bronzed by wilderness sun and black hair falling over his shoulders like a midnight waterfall. His dark eyes had the depth of one who'd seen both glory and tragedy, and when he fixed his gaze on Elena, she felt as if being evaluated by a judge who saw beyond surface appearances. "This is the woman they send me?" he asked in clear English, though with marked accent, addressing the captain. His voice had a tone of incredulity, making Elena's cheeks burn with humiliation. "You think I'll accept someone delivered to me as if I were an animal thrown food?" The captain hardened his expression. "You have no choice, Viking. This woman is part of the agreement. Will you treat her with respect or face the firing squad again?" Elena found her voice for the first time since arriving. "I didn't ask to be here either," she declared with dignity, surprising everyone present, including herself. "But here we both are, so we'll have to find a way to survive this." Her words were direct, without self-pity, and Bjorn looked at her with new attention. In her green eyes, he saw something unexpected. Not a weeping victim, nor a woman broken by circumstances, but someone who, despite evident fear, kept her head high and faced her destiny with courage. The journey. After removing Bjorn's bindings and leaving them alone in the tent, they looked at each other for long minutes in silence. Two strangers united by circumstances neither had chosen. Two prisoners of others' decisions, but with the possibility of writing together a story no one else could anticipate. The journey toward Viking territory lasted 3 days, feeling like eternity. Elena rode in silence on a mare assigned to her while Bjorn mounted beside her on a pinto horse, seeming an extension of his own being. He hadn't spoken to her again since the military camp, but she could feel his eyes occasionally observing her, evaluating each gesture, each reaction to the increasingly wild landscape surrounding them. Viking territory was different from everything Elena had known. Mountains rose like red stone giants toward infinite sky, while valleys extended covered with heather and shrubs, seeming to whisper ancestral secrets with each wind gust. It was land speaking of freedom and resistance, where each rock told stories of warriors who'd fought to preserve their way of life for generations. Arrival. When they finally arrived at the Viking settlement, Elena felt as if she'd entered a completely different world. Leather tents extended in a perfect circle around a central space, where burned a fire seeming never to extinguish. Bronze-skinned children ran between tents, stopping to observe with curiosity the fair-skinned woman who'd arrived with one of their warriors. "This will be your dwelling," Bjorn finally said, pointing toward a smaller tent located on the circle's periphery. His first words in 3 days sounded rough, as if speaking cost him physical effort. "Will you sleep there? I'll sleep outside until we decide what to do with you." The words weren't cruel, but neither kind. It was as if Bjorn were establishing basic rules of coexistence neither had chosen. Elena nodded silently, understanding she had to prove her worth before earning any respect in this place. The tent was simple but functional, a bed made of buffalo hides, some clay vessels for water, and a small area where she could store her scarce belongings. It was more Spartan than the humblest room at the manor, but something in its simplicity calmed her. There were no luxuries to maintain, no appearances to uphold, only the basic need to survive one day at a time. The adaptation. The first days were the most difficult of her life. Viking women watched her with mixture of curiosity and distrust. She'd arrived from the world of their enemies, from the people who'd killed their brothers and sons in countless battles. How could they trust someone whose father had probably shot at Viking warriors? Astrid, a middle-aged woman with scars on her hands, speaking of a life of hard work, was first to approach. "Do you know how to do anything useful?" she asked directly in broken English. "Or do you only know how to sit, like manor women?" Elena had grown up protected, but not useless. Her mother had taught her to sew, cook, and care for the wounded when necessary. "I know how to work with my hands," she responded honestly, "but I need you to teach me how to do it here." That simple answer changed something in Astrid's expression. There was no arrogance in Elena's words, no pretension of superiority, only honesty from someone willing to learn. During the following weeks, Elena immersed herself in learning a completely different way of life. She learned to tan hides under guidance of women who'd perfected the art for decades. Her hands, once soft as petals, filled with calluses and small wounds. But each mark was proof she was adapting to her new reality. She learned to identify edible desert plants, to find water in places where it seemed impossible, to prepare foods with ingredients she'd never seen. Each day was a survival lesson, but also a respect lesson toward a culture that had learned to live in harmony with harsh land. The crisis. Bjorn watched her from distance, but kept his word to sleep outside the tent. Some nights, Elena heard him moving around the fire he lit to protect the entrance, and she wondered what thoughts occupied the mind of a man who'd lost his freedom at the same time she'd lost hers. One afternoon, while Elena helped repair a tent damaged by wind, news arrived putting the entire settlement on alert. A group of children had gone out to collect wild fruits and hadn't returned before nightfall. In Viking territory, night brought dangers that could cost lives: wild animals, treacherous terrain, or worse, Saxon soldiers on patrol. "We'll form search groups," announced Harold, the settlement's chief. "Bjorn, you know the northern canyon trails better than anyone." Elena saw tension in Bjorn's face. It was his first opportunity to demonstrate loyalty to the settlement after his capture, but also an escape opportunity if he chose not to return. All eyes were on him, waiting to see if he'd choose honor or personal freedom. "I'll go," Bjorn declared without hesitation. "But she comes with me," he added, pointing at Elena. His declaration surprised everyone, especially her. "The Saxon woman?" Harold asked with evident skepticism. "What for?" "She has small hands and it can reach places we cannot," Bjorn responded. "If the children are injured or trapped, she could be useful." It was the first time Bjorn had spoken of her as something more than a burden, and Elena felt a strange mixture of pride and nervousness. She knew this was her opportunity to prove she could be more than a tolerated stranger in the settlement. The search. The search took them through rocky trails winding between red stone walls, rising like natural cathedrals toward the starry sky. Bjorn moved with silent grace of someone born to live in harmony with earth, while Elena struggled to maintain pace without making noise that could alert any danger. "Why did you really bring me?" she finally asked when they stopped to drink water from a spring hidden between rocks. Bjorn studied her for a long moment before responding. "Because you needed to prove your worth as much as I needed to prove mine," he said with brutal honesty. "If we return without the children, we'll both be seen as failures. If we find them, we'll both have earned our place." His words revealed deep understanding of the social dynamic both faced. They weren't just a captured warrior and a delivered woman. They were two outsiders who needed to prove they deserved to belong to this community. The discovery. It was Elena who first heard the weak cries coming from a deep crack in the canyon wall. Her ear, trained to hear subtle sounds of domestic life, caught what Bjorn had overlooked. "There," she whispered, pointing toward the crevice, seeming to swallow moonlight. Bjorn peered into the crack and confirmed her suspicions. 3 children were trapped in a natural cavity, frightened, but apparently unharmed. The problem was, the opening was too narrow for an adult warrior to descend without getting stuck. "Can I go down?" Elena offered without hesitation, evaluating the opening with eyes that had learned to calculate spaces during her weeks working with the settlement's women. "It's dangerous," Bjorn murmured, but she was already studying the best way to descend. "Everything in this life is dangerous," she responded with a smile surprising the warrior. "At least, this time, I can choose my own risk." With a rope made of plant fibers tied around her waist, Elena slowly descended toward the cavity where the terrified children waited. Her heart beat strongly, but not from fear. For the first time since arriving in Viking territory, she felt truly useful. The children clung to her as if she were an angel sent to rescue them, and one by one she managed to secure them with the rope so Bjorn could hoist them to the surface. When she herself was finally hoisted up, she found the warrior observing her with an expression she hadn't seen before in his eyes. "You have the heart of a warrior," he murmured while helping her stand on firm ground. It was the first compliment she'd received since her arrival, and she felt something ignite in her chest. It wasn't just gratitude or relief. It was recognition of having found a part of herself she'd never known, the recognition. The return to the settlement was triumphant. The rescued children's parents received Elena not as a stranger, but as someone who'd risked her own safety for their children's well-being. The women who'd previously watched her with distrust now looked at her with genuine respect. That night, for the first time since her arrival, Bjorn approached the fire where Elena sat alone after the celebration. "May I sit with you?" he asked, a courtesy he hadn't shown before. "It's your settlement," she responded. "I'm the unwanted guest." "Not anymore," he said, sitting at respectful distance, but close enough they could speak in low voices. "Today you proved your presence here can be a blessing, not a curse." For the first time since they'd met, they truly talked. Bjorn told her about his capture, about how he'd fought until falling unconscious defending a group of elders during a Saxon army attack. Elena told him of her life at the manor, of how she'd grown up feeling useful only in domestic tasks, without imagining she had inner strength to face real challenges. "Do you miss your previous life?" he asked when the fire had reduced to embers glowing like fallen stars. Elena contemplated the question for a long moment. "I miss the security," she admitted. "I miss knowing what to expect each day. But I don't miss feeling useless. Here, every day I survive is a victory I won myself." Bjorn nodded with understanding. "I miss the freedom to ride without limits, but I don't miss the loneliness of not truly belonging anywhere." His words revealed vulnerability Elena hadn't expected. This warrior, who seemed so strong and self-sufficient, was also a man searching for his place in the world. When they parted that night, both knew something had changed between them. They were no longer just two prisoners tolerating each other. They were two people who'd begun seeing each other as complete human beings, with stories, fears, and strengths deserving respect. The deepening. The days following the rescue completely transformed Elena's life in the Viking settlement. Women who'd previously looked at her with distrust now sought her help with tasks requiring delicate hands or different perspective. Children ran toward her when they saw her, remembering how she'd risked her safety to save them from the cave's darkness. But it was young Eric, the 6-year-old boy she'd rescued first, who became her constant shadow. His parents had died in a Saxon army attack months ago, and since then he'd lived under the tribe's protection, but without a family's specific warmth. Something in Elena's gentleness had touched his wounded heart, and she'd responded to that need with maternal instinct she didn't know she possessed. "Elena," he'd asked one morning while she helped him braid ropes for fishing nets, "will you stay with us forever?" The question hit her like a punch to the stomach. Would she stay forever? She hadn't thought in terms of forever since her arrival. She'd been so focused on surviving one day at a time that she hadn't allowed herself to imagine a real future in this place. "I don't know, little one," she responded honestly, caressing the boy's black hair. "Would you like me to stay?" "Yes," he responded without hesitation. "Bjorn wants you to stay too." I see it in his eyes when he looks at you." The child's words made her smile. Children had a way of seeing truths adults struggled to hide. It was true. Something had changed in how Bjorn observed her. It was no longer the cold evaluation of a warrior measuring a potential threat. Now there was curiosity, respect, and something deeper neither dared name. The test. That same afternoon, while Elena helped Astrid prepare medicines with desert herbs, a young warrior arrived running with alarming news. A family of Saxon settlers had camped near the sacred spring, the place where Vikings performed ancestral ceremonies and where no strangers were permitted. "They're sick," the young man reported, panting from running. "A woman, her husband, and 2 small children. They seem to have the killing fever, but they're too weak to move." Harold immediately convened a war council. The presence of Saxons on sacred territory was a violation normally punished by death. But attacking a sick family could bring army vengeance and endanger the entire settlement. "We must expel them before they contaminate the sacred water," declared one of the younger warriors, whose father had died at Saxon soldiers' hands. "If they're as sick as Falcon says, they'll die on the road," another replied. "Their deaths on sacred territory would contaminate the land worse than their living presence." Bjorn had remained silent during the debate, but when all voices quieted, he stood. "I know this sickness," he said with grave voice. "My younger sister died from it 3 winters ago. If it's truly the killing fever, they'll soon be too weak to be a threat, but also too weak to leave." It was then that Elena, who'd been listening from the circle's edge where women were permitted to observe but not participate, did something surprising everyone. She stepped forward and spoke directly to the council. "I can help them," she declared with firm voice, resonating in expectant silence. "At my father's manor, I saw this sickness several times. I know how to prepare medicines that can save them. If we restore their health, they can leave by their own will without contaminating sacred ground." The silence that followed was so profound, you could hear wind whispering between tents. A Saxon woman offering to save other Saxons could be seen as betrayal to her new tribe. But it could also be the perfect solution to a problem threatening violent consequences. "And if they try to harm you?" Harold asked, studying Elena's determined face. "If they recognize you as a lord's daughter and try to take you with them by force, then they'll have proven they didn't deserve my help," Elena responded calmly. "But if they're truly dying, they'll have no strength for anything except thanking any relief they receive." Bjorn stood slowly. "I'll accompany her," he announced, his declaration adding new dimension to the debate. "If anything goes wrong, I'll be there to protect her. If the medicine works, I'll be witness that she chose to save Saxon lives to protect Viking land." The healing. 2 hours later, Elena and Bjorn rode toward the sacred spring, carrying saddlebags filled with medicinal herbs she'd prepared under Astrid's guidance. When they arrived at the spring, they found exactly what the young warrior had described. A settler family had established an improvised camp near crystalline water, but it was evident they hadn't chosen this place from disrespect, but from desperation. The man lay unconscious under a tattered blanket, while the woman, despite her own fever, tried giving water to 2 children trembling uncontrollably. "Who's there?" the woman shouted with hoarse voice when she saw the riders approaching. Her hand moved instinctively toward an old rifle resting beside her, but she was too weak to lift it. "We come to help," Elena responded in English, dismounting slowly not to frighten the sick family further. "I'm a healer. I can prepare medicine for the fever." The woman studied her with eyes glazed from sickness. "You're Saxon?" she asked incredulously. What are you doing with a Viking? It's a long story, Elena responded, approaching with gentle, non-threatening gestures. What's important now is your children need medicine, and I know how to prepare it. During the following hours, Elena worked tirelessly preparing willow bark infusions to lower fever, antiseptic herb poultices for infected wounds, and nutritious broth made with roots that would strengthen their weakened bodies. Bjorn helped without comments, holding vessels, feeding the fire, and watching the perimeter to ensure there were no additional dangers. "Why are you helping us?" the woman murmured when she'd recovered enough strength to sit. "We're strangers to you, and your companion is Viking. You should want us dead." Elena stopped her work grinding herbs and looked directly into the woman's eyes. "Because there are moments in life when we must choose between hatred and compassion," she responded with profound simplicity. "I choose compassion." Bjorn, who'd been listening in silence, felt something move deeply in his chest. In those words, he recognized the heart of the woman he'd begun to admire. Someone capable of transcending artificial divisions between peoples to simply see human suffering needing relief. By evening of the second day, the family had recovered enough strength to travel. The man could stand without help, children ran around camp, and the woman had regained color in her cheeks. Before leaving, they approached Elena with tears in their eyes. "We have nothing valuable to offer you," the man said with voice broken by emotion. "But we'll never forget that a woman of great heart saved our lives when we were lost." "Your recovery is all the payment I need," Elena responded. "Travel safely and stay away from territories that don't belong to you." When the family disappeared on the horizon, Elena and Bjorn remained alone by the sacred spring. Stars began appearing in the purple evening sky, and crystalline water reflected the growing moon's silver light. The confession. "Why did you really do it?" Bjorn asked, sitting beside her on a smooth rock rising by the water. "It wasn't just compassion. There was something more." Elena contemplated the stars for a long moment before responding. "Because I wanted to prove I can choose to protect this place as much as any warrior born here," she admitted. "Saving that family and making them leave by their own will protected this spring's sanctity better than killing them would have done." Bjorn nodded slowly. "You understand more about being Viking than many born here understand," he murmured. "Being a warrior doesn't always mean fighting. Sometimes it means finding paths, avoiding unnecessary battles." His words created comfortable silence between them, the kind that can only exist between people who understand each other deeply. It was Bjorn who finally broke that stillness, speaking of something he'd kept guarded since his capture. "My real name isn't Bjorn," he confessed, his voice barely a whisper in the night. "It's Sigurd, which means Victory Guardian in my grandmother's tongue. Bjorn is the name I use with Saxons because it's easier for them to pronounce. But you deserve to know my true name." Elena felt she'd been given a precious gift. In indigenous cultures, sharing one's real name was an act of profound trust, an invitation to know a person's true soul. "Sigurd," she repeated softly, testing the syllables' sound on her tongue. "It's beautiful. It means every night when I look at the stars, I can think of your true name." He turned toward her, and for the first time since they'd met, Elena saw something in his eyes that made her tremble internally. It wasn't just respect or friendship. It was the glow of a man beginning to see a woman not as imposed burden, but as companion, chosen by heart. Elena, he murmured her name like a prayer. Do you know what your name means? My mother told me it means shining light, she responded, surprised by the question. Then your name is also perfect, he smiled, a genuine smile completely transforming his face, because you've turned this harsh place into a garden where beautiful things can grow. When they returned to the settlement that night, something fundamental had changed between them. They were no longer just Bjorn and Elena, the captured warrior and delivered woman. They were Sigurd and Elena, two people who'd begun recognizing each other as soulmates in a world that had tried to separate them. The proposal. 3 months had passed since the night by the sacred spring, and Elena's life in Viking territory had found a rhythm she'd never experienced before. Her relationship with Sigurd had blossomed like a garden in the wilderness. They slept in the same tent, but in separate beds, respecting traditions, but between them had grown a connection transcending the physical. Soon, the ceremony season arrives, Sigurd had told her one morning. It's when our people celebrate sacred unions. Harold has asked if I wish to request permission to. His voice faded, but his eyes completed the question. Are you asking if I want to be your wife, according to your people's traditions? Elena murmured, barely able to believe those words. I'm asking if you want to build with me a life that's our choice, not others' imposition, he responded, taking her hands. I'm asking if you want us to decide our own destiny. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I want to choose a life with you. The return. But destiny had other plans. That same afternoon, young Eric came running with terror in his eyes. Elena! Saxon soldiers! He shouted, pointing toward the horizon where a dust cloud approached. Many soldiers with banners! When the riders appeared, what Elena saw struck her like lightning. At the front rode her brother Edmund, dressed in captain's uniform. Beside him came Lord William, her father. 30 soldiers formed an intimidating presence behind them. Elena! Lord William shouted when he saw her. My daughter, we've come to take you home! Home. That word, which once meant security, now sounded like a prison. Sigurd immediately appeared at her side. You don't have to go with them, he murmured. You're free to choose your own path. Lord William approached with determined steps. Months had completely transformed Elena. Her skin was bronzed, her body strong, and her eyes shone with confidence. Look what you've become, he murmured, dressed like a savage, living in primitive conditions, forgetting everything we taught you. I've become someone useful, Elena responded with serene calm. I've become someone who can save lives and choose her own destiny. Isn't that what you wanted? Edmund stepped forward. You've been too long among these savages. You no longer think clearly. It's time to return to civilization. Civilization? Elena asked with defiance. A place where I was considered useless all my life? Here I've found a civilization that values my heart, not just my surname. The decision. Lord William exchanged a look with Edmund. They'd expected to find a broken daughter, not a woman defending her new life with passion. We've come to offer you redemption, Lord William announced. Lord Thornton's son wants to marry you. He's a respectable man, willing to overlook your experience with Vikings. I need no one's redemption, Elena declared, and I need no man who tolerates me as favor. I've found a man who loves me for who I truly am. Lord William noticed Sigurd then, who'd remained silent but alert. This is the Viking who's filled your head with romantic ideas, he asked with contempt. You think you can have a real life with a war prisoner? Sigurd stepped forward with natural dignity. Lord Ravenswood, he said in perfect English, my name is Sigurd, and I'm no one's prisoner. Your daughter chose to stay of her own free will, and I chose to love her of my own free will. If she decides to leave, I'll let her go with my blessing. If she decides to stay, I'll protect her with my life. His words were pronounced with such dignity that even Edmund seemed impressed. Elena, Lord William intervened with different approach, think of your mother. Lady Margaret cries every night since you left. Think of the pain you cause her. The mention of her mother struck Elena deeply. How is mother really? Sick with sadness, Edmund responded. Physicians say her heart weakens from grief of losing you. She might not survive if her only daughter doesn't return. The words were daggers in Elena's soul. Despite everything, Lady Margaret had shown unconditional love. Sigurd, seeing his beloved's pain, made a decision demonstrating the depth of his love. Elena, he said softly, if you need to go see your mother, I'll wait for you no matter how long it takes. His words finally broke Elena's defenses. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she struggled with the most difficult decision of her life. I need time to think, she murmured. I can't decide now, so suddenly. Harold stepped forward. We invite you to spend the night in our settlement, he announced. You can see how your daughter lives here. In the morning, she'll decide with clear mind. That night was tense. Elena sat between two worlds, her family on one side, Sigurd and young Eric on the other. During dinner, she saw how her father and brother observed every aspect of Viking life, seeking to confirm prejudices, but they also saw unexpected moments, how young Eric cuddled against Elena with absolute trust, how women treated her as beloved sister, how Sigurd observed her with evident love. That boy is, Lord William began. He's my adopted son, Elena responded with pride. His parents died, and I chose to care for him. He chose to love me as mother. Lord William studied the interaction. The genuine bond between them was evident, something he'd failed to create with his own daughter. When night deepened, Elena found herself alone with her decision. Sigurd approached where she contemplated stars. What will you decide? He asked softly. I don't know, she admitted with painful honesty. I love the life we've built here. I love you. I love Eric. I love who I've become. But I also love my mother, and the idea she's dying because of me destroys me. Sigurd took her hands. Then go with them, he said with generosity breaking his heart. Go care for your mother. I'll wait here until you can return. And if I can't return, if they force me to stay, then I'll have had the blessing of loving you during these perfect months, he interrupted with sad smile. And that will be more true love than many experience in an entire lifetime. His words were the final drop. Elena threw herself into his arms, sobbing while struggling with an impossible decision. The return. At dawn, when Lord William prepared departure, Elena emerged with determination. I'll go with you, she announced, but only to see my mother. I accept no marriage proposals, and I'll return as soon as I know she's well. Lord William protested, but Elena held firm to her conditions. It's my final decision. Either accept my terms, or I stay here forever. An hour later, as she rode away from the settlement with soldiers, Elena looked back to see Sigurd and young Eric watching her departure, with broken but completely understanding hearts. She didn't know it would be the last time she'd see them for many months, nor that doing right by her mother would lead her to face her life's most difficult test. Elena returns to the manor, cares for her recovering mother, faces pressure to marry Lord Thornton's son, but her mother secretly helps her escape. The final return. When Elena finally made it back to Viking territory after escaping her family's pressure, she found Sigurd had waited faithfully. Young Eric had fallen seriously ill in her absence, but recovered under their combined care when she returned. The wedding ceremony took place under a full moon, with the entire tribe gathered to bless their union. 5 years later, Elena and Sigurd had built a prosperous community, serving as bridge between two worlds. Their home had become a place where Saxon and Viking families lived in harmony, where children played together regardless of skin color, and where love had proven stronger than any prejudice. Elena, now mother of 3 children of her own, plus young Eric, had become a recognized healer throughout the region. Her story was told around fires as example of how true love can transform destinies and heal ancestral wounds. One afternoon, while watching her children play in the garden she'd planted by their home, Sigurd approached and embraced her from behind. "Do you ever miss your previous life?" he asked, as he had done so many times over the years. "How can I miss a life where I was never truly happy?" she responded, leaning against his strong chest. "Here I have everything I always dreamed without knowing I was dreaming it. A husband who loves me completely, children who are my joy, and a purpose filling my soul." As the sun set, painting the sky gold and crimson, Elena knew she'd chosen correctly. True love had triumphed over all obstacles, and her story had become a legend of hope for all women who believed their happiness depended on others' decisions. She'd learned that true love doesn't just change lives. It creates entirely new worlds where anything is possible. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more fascinating stories. Viking history's greatest figures and events.